Bills were the favorites to win the Super Bowl entering the season. Only one of these 5 teams remain. The Chiefs at 11-1. And the Bills will probably be amongst the favorites going into 2023 as well, but that's the last thing on their minds right now as they exit the playoffs. Well, let's talk about those Bills with Brady Quinn and bring in the hardest working man in the building today, former general manager Rick Spielman. What, do you had half a dozen hits today by now?
Yeah, no, it's amazing. People actually want to listen to what I say. It sure doesn't happen at home.
We'll ask Ryan Wilson about that afterwards. But I want to start with you here because of the fact that you said yesterday that you felt the Bills were a team of destiny.
I didn't.
How are you feeling today?
I didn't tell you which destiny it was. It was a destiny of defeat or it was a destiny of victory. It was just a destiny. So I just leave it at that.
Yeah, that game got off. I mean, it's right from the get. I mean, once Cincinnati turned on the field and scored, and then Buffalo subsequently punted, you just got the sense that this was not going to go the way I think Buffalo Bills fans had.
No, Josh Allen never looked in rhythm. Their offense never looked in rhythm. Lou Anarumo did a great job from a defensive game plan standpoint. They couldn't move the ball. Stefan Diggs only had 4 catches for like 35 yards. Great job by Cincinnati. And on the earlier hit, what you talked about, Joe Cool or Joe, whatever you want to call him,
Shiesty.
That quarterback and his attitude goes all the way down through that locker room. And because of how he approaches everything, serious, but looks like he's enjoying every minute of it, that's made a huge difference in the Cincinnati Bengals.
There's no doubt about it. And I think for the Bills, the question is, where do you pick up the pieces? What pieces are you missing coming into the season? Not only were you the favorite because of the construct of this roster, but also because of who your quarterback is, and you're not getting the most out of him. I mean, I think that's the one thing that I'd be curious to ask you, Rick, is if you're the Bills general manager, you've got a talent like Josh Allen, and he's just not playing up to his capability, and you've seen this now in a few years in the playoffs, what changes do you make? What changes do you go about talking or asking?
Yeah, and they're going to have a lot of tough decisions. They're not going to have a lot of cap room, but, I may ask you, do you think it was a coordinator? What Daboll did and how well he played last year, and with the new offensive coordinator, Ken Dorsey, and he'll grow into that position, but that was his first year time in that position. Does he grow? But it looked like Josh Allen took a step back a little bit this year from where he was playing last year.
It's an interesting question. I think, like, as any time, you've got a guy who's kind of getting his feet wet in the first year within an offensive system, it takes some time for him to develop an identity. And maybe, how he wants to call the offense differently. That could definitely be something that I think they look at in the offseason. The other thing is, I never felt like watching them this year, they could be consistently physically dominant on the offensive line. I think they could probably use some upgrades there, however they look at it, and maybe another compliment to Stefan Diggs. And that's not a knock on Gabe Davis or some of the other pieces that they have. Isaiah McKenzie had a good year too, some of the other pieces. I just think you look at the offensive firepower of some of these teams, you go, man, it's at times overwhelming. I mean, we watched them against the Bengals. You're going, it's Jamar Chase, it's T. Higgins, it's Tyler Boyd. There's all these weapons. Hayden Hurst is a former first-round pick. It can be overwhelming. And I think right now, outside of Diggs, when he's not making plays, I don't know that they can rely enough on Gabe Davis. I think they need that one more special piece.
Yeah, and they don't have a lead running back like Cincinnati Bengals had in the way Mixon played yesterday. And but I'd also look at the defensive side because Poyer's up, Edmonds is up, the linebacker are both coming on restricted free agents. I think the biggest difference for Buffalo, they went out and got very aggressive to go all in and built this roster, even when they made that late trade for Hines from Indianapolis and brought him in to do the kickoff and punt returns. But I would say this, without Von Miller, that was a huge, huge hit to them on trying to get over that hump to the next level.
Okay, let's talk about the Jaguars because, Rick, I want to get your take here because we've talked about the Jaguars kind of off camera, but just there's this feeling that the team maybe turned the corner this year. Trevor Lawrence said as much after their loss to Kansas City. How close are the Jags to reaching that upper echelon of the AFC and being able to maintain that?
Well, you got to give credit to Doug Peterson when he did. It was a great hire for them. It was the right hire for a franchise quarterback in Trevor Lawrence. They just got to get him some more pieces and some more playmakers on the offensive side of the ball. Trent Baalke did a great job. Now, they went out and overspent, but they spent a lot of money in free agency last year. Probably the key guy that they want to come back is Ingram, their tight end, who is going to be an unrestricted free agent, but they don't have a lot of cap room. And in fact, they're going to have to make some roster moves to get under the cap if they want to keep an Ingram or someone like that.
We've been in those shoes before, and I don't know the history of how much cap space you would have at times, but when you have so much and you got a new head coach and everyone's saying, hey, you got to spend this money. We've got this young budding quarterback that we think's special. How do you go about managing that? Because I know they spent more than anyone, I think, in the NFL history.
They had to. No one wanted to go to Jacksonville, even though it's a tax-free state. I would go there for a tax-free. That's why I moved here and retired down here.
But now it's different. Now it's different, though, because I think the success that they had, and Trevor Lawrence with the year he had, now he's that guy to say, okay, come play with me. Like you mentioned, a playmaker, I'm with you.
And Doug Peterson, I think that makes a difference. I don't know if anyone wanted to go play with Urban Meyer, but everyone sure want to go to play with Doug Peterson, see how quickly they've got that turned around. Now, they still need to build and add some pieces, but at least they put that base building blocks in place, and now they can just add on top of that, and I believe a lot of it's going to have to come through the draft.
And a lot of it, I mean, we've talked about wide receivers, young quarterbacks paired with, really good wide receivers. I mean, Calvin Ridley. There's, it's going to be interesting to see how he integrates into this offense.
I assume he'll be reinstated. I don't think you make that move unless you've got some sort of reassurance.
Well, it was worth the risk because if he doesn't get reinstated, it's not really going to cost you anything. Right. So, and it'll be interesting to see after that long a layoff, just like we talked about Deshaun Watson and how rusty he looked. Calvin Ridley was a very good receiver and maybe a true number one receiver. But I don't know if he's going to be that same after this long a layoff.
You're saying it could be a gamble.
It's a gamble.
Yeah, it's a gamble. All right, let's talk about the Giants. They hit into the offseason with two notable free agents, Saquon Barkley and quarterback Daniel Jones. Head coach Brian Daboll not exactly ringing the bell in terms of Daniel Jones and his future there after they got beat by Philly. Brady, where do the Giants go from here?
I'm going to pass this to Rick because this is the one team
this is one of those.
No, this is made for a general manager. You've got Saquon Barkley as an unrestricted free agent. You've got Daniel Jones who's staring free agency down amongst other players. But those are the two you got to make a decision on. So I'm going to pass the buck right now to Rick. That's your job, not mine.
Never mind. You can have it.
Yeah.
No, those are some very difficult decisions. Now, they did not exercise that fifth-year option, which would have saved them some money if they did.
Is that surprising to you?
Well, they didn't know who he was. Yeah. And if you looked at all the tape on him previously, he looked like a first-round bust, if you want to be honest with yourself. But what Daboll did with him this year, he was able to run the ball. He threw the ball more efficiently. He didn't have a lot of playmakers around him. They're trying to put together an offensive line. Their defense still needs help. They need a lot of help across the board. But if you don't do something, now if you franchise him, that's going to be a pretty hefty price, but that's going to cost you
$5.2 million, I believe. Now.
Yeah, and that's going to cost you ability to keep adding players to this roster unless you're just going to build it straight through the draft. But I would really look at what do we have to do to keep Daniel Jones right now? Maybe even it's on a 3-year deal or a shorter-term deal because you're picking too low in the draft to maybe go get these top 4 quarterbacks in the draft this year. So if not Daniel Jones, then who? Unless you're going to say, we're totally just going to scrap this and just tear it down and start over.
Okay, so is Jones the priority for you then if you're looking
at
Jones?
Barkley's a great player. He had a great year. But what are you putting value on? Now you're starting as a general manager. Am I putting more value on the quarterback position or the running? Take the players' names off of it. Can I go get an efficient running back or two in the draft? And there's going to be some really good running backs in this draft at a cheaper cost than I would going to have to pay Saquon Barkley.
It's a great call. I mean, Bijan Robinson out of Texas is the first one that comes to mind who was a true difference maker. I mean, he's the type of running back that has the skill set that could replace what Saquon Barkley brings, and obviously at a much cheaper cost. I guess the only thing I'd ask you is, obviously they had the exclusive franchise tag or the tag to play with. If they end up tagging Barkley, I mean, obviously that number's not going to be
That's a lot.
high.
That's around $12 million, I believe, 12 or 13 million for a running back.
Which seems like a lot, but it's only a 1-year commitment, where meanwhile that's just giving you an idea that you're basically saying we want to try to get to an extension with Daniel Jones, right?
Well, yeah, they run Wildcat with him so he can play quarterback.
Lastly, Rick, Cowboys, another disappointing end to the season. Turns out the 7th time wasn't the charm in terms of getting to the conference game. So how about them Cowboys this offseason?
Well, that's going to be the biggest decision they're going to have to make, in my opinion, is that running back. Do you keep Elliott, or do you try to go out and extend Pollard? Because when they lost him yesterday, they lost an explosive playmaker. Only one they had left was CeeDee Lamb that could make explosive plays. You're going to have to still stay with Dak Prescott because of the contract. But technically, you're really going to have to decide, are you going to pay 2 running backs at premium cost, or maybe you go with Pollard and you cut Elliott.
Yeah, and I think the dead cap hit would be $11.86 million if they were to cut him this year. And you could speak to what the June 1st.
The June 1st, yeah. Then you can push it out more.
2 years.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Okay. So then we look at the Cowboys in terms of their playoff woes continuing. Yeah. I mean, do you feel for Cowboys fans? I mean, you kind of have to feel for them a little bit.
I feel for the TVs they're watching. All I see on social media right now is people breaking their TVs that are Dallas Cowboys fans. I mean, the TV didn't do it, folks. All right, don't blame the TV.
I was more enjoying because Brandon was really suffering this morning.
Oh, yeah, poor Baylor. Yeah. Brady Quinn, Rick Spielman discussing the offseason for a few playoff losers this weekend. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Great stuff as always. Rick, you've got something else to do, so get out of here. Off-season storylines and playoff storylines will be the focus on the Pick Six pod. Will Brinson, John Breach, Ryan Wilson, all the Super Friends. I think they're still there, right? You can download and follow the Pick Six wherever you get your podcast. You can also scan that QR code to listen now.